doesn't give me the option.
Okay, hang on, I'll just do that now. Right, okay, we're recording, everybody. Just a word about that recording. We're going to ask Michelle to do a Q&A session at the end of her presentation, which won't be recorded. The recording will be made available in due course in various outlets through the British Society of Criminology Hate Crime Network and through other means. And so people can watch this at their own leisure or look at it later, use it for study purposes, stop it, rewind it, do whatever you want with it, basically. And today our guest presenter is Michelle Cunliffe from Nottingham Trent University. I must say that this entire, since I've been working with this entire set of online discussions, I've found it absolutely fascinating, and well done for Leah Birch for setting this up. It's really been quite something. Our next one is in April after this, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Okay, I'll just introduce you to Michelle. Michelle has studied previously at the University of Derby, where she studied psychology, at Portsmouth, where she studied criminal justice and psychology, and now at Nottingham Trent, she's doing a PhD in the nighttime economy and women's experiences of sexual violence. Interestingly, Michelle is also focusing on older women. Above that strange kind of limit of 24, above that you're in some kind of other universe. She looks at older women and working class women and their experiences of sexual violence, I beg your pardon. Michelle was formerly a hairdresser. I didn't get her business card because I don't have very much need for that kind of thing. And she did her GCSEs and stuff late in life. So Michelle realized later in life that there was a need to start learning, and did all the things that a lot of people do when they're much younger. She's been teaching in various capacities for 10 years, and this year she started attending her first conferences, and she'll be hopefully presenting a paper at the BSc in Preston this year. So perhaps we can go along and see her there as well if you're attending. Her passions are particularly about working class and older women's voices not being heard. And I was suggesting when we were talking earlier that older women move away from the concept of the ideal victim being the white younger woman. And Michelle is moving away from that and talking about women who don't normally get their voices heard. For the future, she hopes to continue her research into sexual violence for women and work with the community rather than just be isolated in the university setting, and focus on public pubs and places of entertainment as well, where sexual violence might occur or where women are discriminated against in those settings. So you've heard enough from me, and thank you for staying awake this long. Let's get on to the real reason we're here, and that's Michelle. So Michelle, I'd ask you to start now, please.
Thank you for that introduction. So thank you for having me. So my name's Michelle, and I'll be presenting preliminary findings from my PhD research. So go easy on me because this is only the second time that I've presented my research. So just to go through what to expect. So I'm just going to provide an overview of the area of sexual harassment, then introduce the rationale for my study and where the PhD research has come from. And then I'm going to discuss the preliminary findings with you. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer. Can I just check, David, that it's moving along when I press the slide?
Yeah, that moved quite nicely, yeah. Michelle. Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you. So to begin with, so I just want to set the context. So sexual harassment has been recognised as being a worldwide issue that predominantly affects women. So Catherine McKinnon in 1979 published Sexual Harassment of Working Women, and she suggested that organisations were sites of power, and she said that these sites of power are where men have power and women do not. So one of the key arguments of McKinnon's work is that sex at work has been used to humiliate and degrade women, and as such is exploitive and degrading. So McKinnon is the first or the person who's been coined as first person who coined the term sexual harassment, bringing it into public language, academic language, and the legal arena as well. And this enabled many feminists to argue that the development of the term allowed women to challenge and protest against the experiences that they were having. McKinnon argued that sexual harassment of women in the workplace could be legally challenged and should be legally challenged as sex discrimination. And you may have heard the term quid pro quo. Women experience sexual harassment, they have to comply or they risk losing their job. This inspired a whole load of research, so looking at sexual harassment in academia. So Ramazan Oglu, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She focused her research on sexual harassment in higher education in particular. And in a similar vein to McKinnon, she argues that sexual harassment is maintained by the structure of a university organisation. This structure is one which puts white male heterosexual males at the top, and women are seen as subordinate. Then in 2016, street harassment became something that was discussed quite a bit in the academic literature, and this has been linked with Vera Gray's work. She is focused on women's experiences of street harassment, and which she says is a broad range of intrusions occurring in public or semi-public spaces, and this can be shopping centres, public transport, recreational spaces, and also the street. And public transport has also recently, a lot of research has gone into public transport and how women might experience sexual harassment on public transport. So Sian Lewis, she focuses her discussion in particular on women's experiences of sexual harassment on the London Underground. Okay, so whilst there has been a lot of work regarding sexual harassment in many domains of life, one area where there is quite a sparse amount of research is in licensed venues. So the British pub, I think the British pub has something unique about it. So it's a special spot in British heritage and British culture. Pubs are often referenced in poems, movies, literature. Taverns have always had a strong significance in British history, and they still have a major impact on modern day. So even if you're not keen on drinking alcohol, you can still go along to a pub and immerse yourself in the culture of a pub. Pubs, bars and clubs are environments where people go to find a partner. And this is I'm thinking long before dating apps, most people would meet somebody either through work or more traditionally through the pub. Pubs are, oh, I've pressed the wrong thing. So here's my little thing about the pub. Pubs are also environments where women receive and are expected to be receptive of male sexual advances. So Fireborn suggests that the unwritten rules of the nighttime economy dictates that a pub is a place where women are there to be looked at and are there to be receptive of men's advances. Now, most of the work that's been done in the nighttime economy has been done in North America and Australia. So in let me move over, sorry about this. So in a UK context, just to situate this, Drink Aware in 2017, they reported that 79% of females expected sexual harassment to occur at least once on a night out. It's been highlighted that women take precautionary measures to avoid sexual harassment. So they might do things such as avoiding certain spaces, avoid being alone, and doing what they can in order to minimise risk in relation to rape and other forms of sexual violence. And this could be self-regulation through things such as clothing. But there is minimal knowledge within a UK context that explores how women perceive incidents of unwanted sexual attention. When do these incidents become unwanted, and how situations are negotiated? So it's therefore evident that there needs to be more research done around the nature and the impact of unwanted sexual attention within the British nighttime economy. So this led me to develop my primary research question. So my primary research question is, what are women's experiences of unwanted sexual attention within the nighttime economy? Now, there are several parts to my research. So another thing that I want to focus on is how do venue staff manage sexual behaviours within the nighttime economy? So bar staff, door staff, they all act as gatekeepers for violence within the nighttime economy. And research has highlighted how women's experiences of harassment has been invalidated and sometimes normalised by venue staff and door staff alike. So this led me to also think about how do venue staff manage sexual behaviours within the nighttime economy. But today I'm solely going to be focusing on what are women's experiences of unwanted sexual attention within the nighttime economy. Okay, so you might have noticed that I've been using the term unwanted sexual attention as well as sexual harassment. So I've put here two common definitions of sexual harassment and highlighted or bolded some key words there that I want you to pay attention to. So when I looked through the literature, definitions of sexual harassment vary, but these two definitions tend to capture what most of the literature refers to. So we've got one by Rape Crisis and one by the United Nations. So these key words such as feeling upset, scared, offended or humiliated, or the behaviour is done in a way that's meant to cause offence or humiliation. Whilst there are certainly examples of behaviours in the nighttime economy in which women feel upset, scared, humiliated or offended, and there are examples of behaviours which are used to cause offence and humiliation, there are examples of this in my own research actually. So I am fully aware that some women will feel upset, scared, offended and humiliated. But I just feel like the official legal definitions of sexual harassment wouldn't capture all the behaviours that occur in the nighttime economy. So, for example, looking at legislation, Section 3 of the Sexual Offences Act 2003, unwanted sexual attention only amounts to assault if it involves non-consensual touching. But this definition doesn't account for things such as sexual remarks or sexual requests or leering or wolf whistling or catcalling. And then section 7, subsection 2 of the Protection from Harassment Act 1997, that does criminalise behaviour that amounts to harassment and stalking, but it also requires that the behaviour by the offender amounts to a minimum of 2 incidences. Now, in the nighttime economy, there are people coming in and out of pubs. And many incidences in the nighttime economy may occur more than once with more than one offender, or only once with more than one offender. Therefore, these incidents don't, they fall outside the scope, these incidents don't capture those specific behaviours that I want to capture in my research. Another thing is that participants might be reluctant to name something as sexually harassing. This is due to the nighttime economy being a liminal space. Okay, the nighttime economy is a site for exploration. It's a place where social norms that usually guide and dictate acceptable behaviour, it differs within the nighttime economy. It's a space where norms and values, everyday norms and values, are suspended. And I've got a quote from one of my participants here that captures this. So Becky, she says that, I guess the environment of a bar allows for a more socially loose atmosphere, so people might say stuff they wouldn't usually say. The nighttime economy is also a hypersexualized environment. It's an environment that encourages sexual encounters. If you go into any cocktail bar and look at the cocktail menu, you can see the names of cocktails, screaming orgasms. They're highly sexualized environments. And I feel like the liminal space of the nighttime economy, pubs, bars and clubs, highlights the tension between the criminal and non-criminal definitions of sexually harassing behaviours. This is why I refer to unwanted sexual attention. So I adopt Bianca Feilborn's definition of unwanted sexual attention. So unwanted sexual attention is any unwanted advances or behaviour that participants have interpreted as being sexual in nature, and it ranges from minor incidences to major incidences. So I did ask my participants to tell me what unwanted sexual attention means to them. So here's one definition. So Arus, she says, obviously the physical stuff, so like groping and, you know, well, anything that's related to touch. So physical things, as well as verbal, as well as staring as well. A similar definition was also provided by Jenna. So Jenna, she says, I think it's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, really, and prolonged, you know, prolonged staring, prolonged touching, kind of invading your space, you know, not being able to pick up on body language. So here you can see how if I'd used the legal definitions, it wouldn't have captured the experiences of these participants. However, definitions were also very varied and contested between participants. So here, Here, for example, we have Maria's interpretation of what unwanted sexual attention is. She says, you go out to socialise, don't you? It's kind of expected that men will approach you. So of course they're going to stare at you and chat to you. That should not be classed as anything sinister. And similarly, Sophie, she also says, I think there's nothing wrong with talking. I don't think that should be seen as something bad or bad behaviour. So this clearly highlights how what is wanted and unwanted varies from person to person, and context is also really important here. So sexual interaction is normative in the nighttime economy, and it's sometimes desired behaviour in specific contexts. So to help me answer my research question, I've been using a qualitative, reflexive, feminist approach. So I've interviewed 23 participants and the age range is 18 to 64. So you can see that I've really tried to, you know, hear a wide range of women's voices. So there's a mix of ethnicity, there is a mix of all participants identified as women. Some of the participants identified as lesbians as well. However, I'm just going to point out that this research is focusing on the heterosexual nature of the nighttime economy. Now, I do touch upon like the alternative scene, but I'm finding something very different occurring in the alternative scene, which I'll hopefully talk about in the future. So I've interviewed 23 participants. They've all been transcribed, and I'm currently analysing the interview data using a thematic approach. And I'm going to share some preliminary findings with you now. So one of there's several themes that I've identified so far when looking through the data. So one of these is that unwanted sexual attention is routine and normalised. So participants have highlighted how sexual attention is just part of going out. And whilst at times it may be unwanted, it isn't always viewed as harmful. So for example, here, Nancy says, I do think it's part of going out. I don't always think it's harmful. Like, I do think that you can have unwanted sexual attention without it being harmful. I do think that's part of going out. Thelma, she also suggests that those things are expected in the pub, you know, that men behave like that in the pub. People go out to meet other people and hook up or whatever. So you tend to let things happen that you wouldn't normally let happen. So here you can see how Thelma is highlighting how unwanted sexual attention is a consequence of a hookup culture. And she also makes reference to the nighttime economy being a liminal space, so what I spoke about earlier. She also suggests that she lets these things happen, or lets things happen that wouldn't normally happen. I think this is really interesting because she's positioning herself as having agency here and suggesting that she's allowing this behaviour to happen. She doesn't necessarily want it, but the context means that she assesses the situation as being less harmful and therefore allows it, because it's just what happens in the nighttime economy. Some participants also describe how they find the behaviour intrusive, but if they didn't receive attention, it made them feel unattractive. So this is something that really surprised me and was something that I did not expect to find when I was interviewing participants. When I was coming up with the research question, I didn't expect women to say that if they didn't receive unwanted attention, that it made them feel unattractive. So Louise, she says, if I didn't get approached by a man and they wouldn't chat me up, I feel really ugly. And that does really knock my confidence. But at the same time, when I do get approached, I feel uncomfortable as well. So here you can see that Louise is caught between placing some type of value on her and her ability to attract male attention, but also not feeling comfortable when she does receive that male attention. Becky, she also says that the last thing I want is men approaching me in a bar, but then at the same time, if they don't approach me, I feel ugly. Again, very similar to Louise, Becky is positioning herself as both not wanting to receive attention, but then not receiving the attention. She internalizes that as her being unattractive. Poppy, she says that as women, we go out to look nice and be told we look nice, and we put clothes on that get us noticed. If no one approached me, then I think there would be something wrong with me. Again, Poppy here is placing value on herself as an individual, attracting male attention. Like I said, this is something that really has thrown me off because I really didn't expect to find participants feeling this way about unwanted sexual attention. The next theme I'm going to talk about is intrusion and exclusion. So pubs and bars, clubs, they all facilitate particular types of behaviour that can be perpetrated. So on the street, for example, catcalling and verbal forms of harassment are quite common. But in the nighttime economy, particularly at its busiest time, the volume of people contained in that space allows for physical and embodied acts of sexual violence to occur. So things such as groping. Equally, bodies in restricted spaces often conceal what is happening, and women might struggle to immediately, discern whether something inappropriate is happening, whether that's an inappropriate touch or whether it's accidental. And this might impact and delay the way that they respond to the behaviour. So, for example, research on public transport has highlighted how crowded natures of transport permits sexual harassment to go undetected. So this density of bodies permits particular types of harassment to be perpetrated, and most commonly groping. For example, Jenna here is telling me where she's most likely to experience unwanted sexual attention. So she says at the actual bar, when you go to order drinks, you're rammed against other people, kind of grazing, touching, getting too close to you as you're ordering a drink. It happened during the playoff final. The playoff final is football for anyone that doesn't know. So a very, very busy time for pubs. So it happened during the playoff final. And of course, it's busy and normal that people are in your personal space. I felt this man pushing himself into the back of me, and it was not accidental. Like, I actually felt his penis on me. But when I turned around, he made a comment about how busy it was. Jenna here is describing how she's wedged between the bar, between other bar goers on a busy evening, and then how, despite it being normal that people would be in your personal space or touching you, this particular incident to her felt very deliberate. You can see by the way she's describing it, she feels it's a deliberate intrusion rather than accidental. So we can see how the busyness and the rhythm of a bar has both facilitated and also concealed the invasion of her body in space. The bar staff that are behind the bar, they're not going to recognise what's going on here. It's just going to look like a busy bar to them. The nature of the nighttime economy as well. The transitory nature of the nighttime economy also is important to how women experience sexual harassment. So the fleeting nature of pub crawling with people coming in and out meant that some of the participants who have experienced unwanted sexual attention felt unsure about what they'd experienced, and then felt that by the time they'd realised what had happened, that it was too late to do anything about it. So, for example, this is demonstrated in this extract by Kate. She says that it's the walking to and from the bar or two different places. When you walk past people, I think men will shout things or touch you, but then the moment has passed when you realise what has happened. So here I had asked Kate whether she'd considered reporting any incidents of unwanted sexual attention. And her response, I believe, demonstrates the way in which women women experience that harassment impacts whether they will report it. So she's clearly saying the moment's passed, it's gone, it's happened. And similarly, the transient nature of waiting at the bar or being on a dance floor also facilitates a fast getaway for a perpetrator. So this makes the bar area and the dance floor a really attractive area for perpetrators because of that fast escape. They can disappear into the crowd. This also meant that participants felt a sense of relief because something would occur, but then the perpetrator would quickly disappear. So there's almost like an end sight to it. So this is very different to things like sexual harassment at work, where if you're being sexually harassed at work by an individual, it's somebody that you've got to face over and over again, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. Whereas the participants highlighted how in a bar it kind of happens, but then it's over as quickly as it's happened. So I've got an extract here from Frankie, and she says, I can really vividly remember dancing and having this guy like thrust his hand like up my skirt between my legs and like literally grab right up between my legs, and like the shock of that happening. I remember just being really shocked and pulling away, and it was so, because again of the crowd of the bodies, you couldn't really like identify who done it. And then later I heard a lot of other women talking about similar things happening, but it was all over so quickly. So here Frankie's highlighting that transient nature of being on the dance floor, somebody taking advantage of that, you know, being able to commit this act of violence against her, but then disappear as quickly as the act occurred. I've also got some more quotes on inclusion and exclusion. So these, I feel, demonstrate the areas that tend to be out of bounds or exclusion zones for women if they want to remain free from harassment. So, for example, Tara says, I would never go to like a corner where I can get boxed in. As a woman, that would be a stupid thing to do. Sarah, she says, me or my girlfriends would never go to the toilet alone. You have to be wise in that situation, you know, walk into the toilets where it is a long and enclosed space. So Sarah is talking about a particular bar that she goes to a lot, and to get to the toilet you have to go along a very dimly lit corridor and down some stairs. And she was talking about how incidents tend to occur in those areas, so away from the watchful eyes of venue staff, for example. And then Penny, she says bars are purposely set up in a way that you have dark nooks and crannies. We try and stay seated or stay where there's light. So again, these are all examples of how women are able to use spaces such as the nighttime economy, pubs and clubs and bars, but they're also excluded from certain areas of those spaces as well. The last theme I want to talk about is engaging in safety work. So safety work is a concept that's been developed by Liz Kelly, and then it was further developed by Fiona Vera Gray. So safety work details the multiple ways in which women perform invisible safety work to keep themselves safe. So, for example, these extracts demonstrate the adaptations that participants make to how they might dress in order to participate in the nighttime economy safely. So, for example, Becky says, going to a pub that is your typical old man pub. I wouldn't go there dressed in a short skirt and heels, for example. Fiona, she says, if I've been in any places like that, and when she's saying like that, she's referring to a sports bar. She says, if I've been in any places like that, dressed like more like I'm going out, you do feel attention. It's like you see them all looking at you, like one of them just said, oh, look at her. So you can feel them all at the exact time looking at you. And Cassie says, I would probably think about whether my outfit is appropriate. So I wouldn't go to a sports bar in the day all dressed up. So here you can see how these women are engaging in safety work. And that's a very conscious decision that they're making in order to stay safe, but also to reduce victimization and being blamed for victimization. Okay, lastly, one of the things that I think is really important, and David spoke about this, is I want to really take an intersectional approach to the analysis that I'm doing. So I haven't fully yet completed all of my analysis, but I'm going to put two quotes on the screen now to show you, because I feel like these two quotes really demonstrate how an intersectional approach to analysing the data captures how keeping safe functions different for different women. So here I've got an extract from Melanie and one from Myra. So they're discussing how their age has meant that they are somewhat safe. So Melanie says, I probably tend to feel safer on a night out now in some ways, but I think that's come with age and my ability to sort of blend into the background. But yeah, that can be annoying. Like when you're trying to get served, the barmen pretty much look through you and serve the younger girls. So yeah, annoying, but at least I can avoid harassment now. And Myra says, I suppose being older, you do feel safer. But then they look at me and they, she's referring to venue staff here, might make comments about appearance or something. And then if you respond, they might be rude to you or just pretend you don't exist and then pay attention to like the younger 18-year-olds instead. So both Melanie and Myra are discussing their age and how they're able to feel somewhat safe to a degree. And whilst this may be desired, so Melanie, for example, saying, yeah, it's annoying, I'm ignored, but at least I can avoid harassment. So the desire to avoid harassment is there. Being older means that they're also experiencing invisibility, even when they don't want to. So they're both referring to times where venue staff have ignored them. So Melanie is referring to when she's been trying to buy a drink and being ignored by venue staff. She's invisible, they're looking straight through her and they're serving younger girls instead. And Myra is actually retelling me a story of where an incident had happened. So she'd been groped by somebody and she went and reported this to door staff. And she said that she felt the door staff completely dismissed her experience as if being older, read as invisible, means that her experience was unlikely to have happened to her. So I think it's really important considering the different ages of the participants and how they are then going to respond, or how venue staff are also going to respond to if they report unwanted sexual attention. Okay, so just to conclude then, so unwanted sexual attention then is not a fixed set of behaviours. It encompasses a broad range of behaviours, and I really feel like it aligns with Liz Kelly's continuum of sexual violence. So as I've demonstrated throughout, participants refer to things such as staring, which we might consider very minor, to the more major experiences of unwanted sexual attention, of the groping or the grabbing. The liminality of the nighttime economy as well has to be considered when we're trying to make sense of sexual harassment and how women experience and also respond to sexual harassment. The busyness and the rhythm of the nighttime economy impacts how women make sense of and respond to sexual harassment, but it is also used by perpetrators to facilitate and conceal unwanted sexual attention. And that is the end of my presentation. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. No, I think that was absolutely fascinating. Yeah, there's some rounds of applause you're getting on the screen there. They don't sound as loud as they do in the real room, but there we are. Just to sum up some of the points I found interesting was that, so this is a highly sexually charged atmosphere. We have a place where there's alcohol in sale, there's other drugs available. The cocktails have got specific names in order to raise the hot-bloodedness of the situation. We have, and fascinating, I thought, that some women expect to be touched and then are disappointed when they're not, and then they're uncomfortable when they are. So this is kind of a whole hodgepodge of different feelings and emotions. And drugs flying around, and people are not going to be behaving rationally. I dare say that people would behave in a different place at a different time without the drugs involved, completely differently. And so, in other words, they're actually changing. People actually change in this place, and it's a place of acceptable change because people expect this stuff to go on. And as you were saying, you know, it differs with age and everything else. What I'm going to ask people to do in a moment is, and we're getting some lovely comments in the chat of people congratulating you. What I'm going to ask in a moment is that people raise their hands to ask a question. I'm going to turn the recording off first. So if you want to raise your hand, please, and then we'll get you in the order that the machine tells me that you came in. If you want to come on the microphone or on camera, it's completely up to you. But one or the other is beneficial because then you can ask your question. So I'm going to stop the recording now.